Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being at the Streets and Transportation Committee meeting of the City of Rehoboth Beach. It is Thursday, August 18th, and I'm calling this meeting to order at 2 p.m. I will do a roll call vote. Dave Diefendorfer,
Here.
John Geiger,
Here.
Donna Maybury,
Here.
David Mann,
Right here.
Elise Moore,
Here.
and the chair is here. We have a full complement of the committee and can conduct business. There's one set of meeting minutes that was sent out for July 21st. Did everyone receive them?
Yes.
Any comments, revisions? And I will accept a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the meeting minutes are approved. We've got no correspondence identified, although I will mention that we did receive one piece of correspondence from the fire department related to one specific agenda item, and I will mention that when we get to it. And I'm going to start with old business, and that is just a update on the recommendations that we've made to the mayor and commissioners related to the sidewalk curb project at Columbia Avenue and Grove Street. We recommended the design as presented to the mayor and commissioners with the assumption that the sidewalk that was included was mandated by DelDOT. After further discussion with DelDOT, after receiving comments from the mayor and commissioners, that is not required from DelDOT. And the mayor and commissioners are now considering that proposal without the sidewalk, which allows the trees to remain and those two parking spots on the east end there to remain. And I'll let Kevin provide any additional information.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think you summed it up pretty well after discussions with the board, and then also going back to the homeowner to make sure that what the board wanted to do, they were okay with the homeowner when it was acceptable to the homeowner. This was kind of the compromise. Basically a curb, as you see outlined in red there, that we think minimizes the safety concerns of the pedestrians and the traffic around that corner, while preserving both of the parking spaces and the trees that were probably going to be impacted if we went with a sidewalk, crosswalk kind of option. So
I will mention that one concern was raised by a resident wanting to keep the sidewalk and a crosswalk going from Grove Park to from Grove Park to the corner of that lot there. I'm sorry. And if we do put the crosswalk in, DelDOT would then require a landing and then the sidewalk to continue. Mayor Mills would only consider that if we then had a crosswalk middle of the block there going over to the other side of Columbia Avenue, which I think no other commissioner is interested in doing that. So although concerns were raised about not having the sidewalk and crosswalks in that area, I think the consensus among the mayor and commissioners is just to leave it without a sidewalk and just a curbing there, and retaining those two parking spots and the trees. And it would leave some landscape grass area that the homeowner has agreed to maintain in that spot.
But no
Kevin,
crosswalks
No crosswalks.
on either direction.
Other direction.
What was the original concern about putting in a sidewalk there? I forget.
I think DelDOT was under the assumption that we wanted one, and we were under the assumption that DelDOT required it.
Oh, okay.
Is the only The homeowner originally asked for just a curb. And that's what we're back to now. So, Kevin, is that summed up pretty well?
I think it's very well.
Go ahead, Donna.
I'm curious, what kind of curb? Is this I mean, is it a cement, concrete curb?
It'll be a concrete curb.
That would be, okay. Because I noticed what is there with the homeowners, like landscaping ties, that aren't part of that, that seems to be doing an effective job. But I just wondered if it's going to be concrete.
It would be concrete. The other aspect of this is it decreases the cost significantly.
Well, I think it's great that it's saving the parking spaces that's, really in high demand in that corner, and also saves the trees, which is critical.
Yeah. Any comments from the public on this topic?
Good afternoon, Walter Brittingham, 123 Rehoboth Avenue. I am not surprised that there's not pictures here showing the farmer's market people walking in the roadway. I've asked the police department, I asked if one of the lieutenants was available. I guess they weren't because the pictures aren't being shown here. And I think it's interesting, the Mayor Mills would only approve this. Well, Mayor Mills is not the only person. There are 7 people on the board, and the others were not in favor of it. But the pictures that are not here, the pictures of the people walking in the street, and never have I heard that we are going to put a value to a person's life, whether they're injured or killed, coming down there. And I don't know that any of you have stood down at the intersection, the corner of Grove and Columbia Avenue, and looked back up the street to watch the people out there. We have a policeman that parks at the back by the bathhouse all day long, unless he's called to go someplace else. We have a bicycle policeman. He's at the entrance to the farmer's market. We have a foot policeman, I think they're called cadets, that are there, but there is no one out watching the traffic out here with all the trucks and everybody going up and down. I don't know why wants to save the 2 parking spaces. The 2 parking spaces are the problem because the people don't get the right-hand side of their vehicle when they're going westbound. They don't get the left side of their vehicle off the roadway. And why are we worried about trees and a few plants? They're not on the owner's property. Get rid of them, make the intersection safe, or the only person that's going to win is Mr. Mendelis when somebody sues. Thank you.
Well, how are you going to make it safe?
Because the people can park off the roadway.
If you had more parking, that's what you're
No,
saying.
they're making the parking. They're parking on they are literally parking on the roadway, and God bless you, ma'am, for the support documents in here. Start with the first item, parking on the roadway is illegal. And if you all read your homework, you'd see that. And they park on the roadway. And the chief doesn't have enough people out there that are authorized to give tickets. And they give the ticket to the vehicle. The driver is the one that parks the damn vehicle on the roadway, and they have the right to have, but doesn't say shall, it says may have the vehicle removed. They have a lot of discretion. The hell with officer discretion. It should not be. If they knowingly park on the roadway, tow the damn vehicle. It doesn't take long. A CDL driver's license person, a licensed ED person, is required to notify his employer if he gets a violation. But it never happens because they don't go down there and ticket people. And this should go back. And since when does the mayor and the city manager have the right to come in here? We have changed the presentation because this was not offered when this was first shown. It had not been exposed to the public. They come in, they change the plan, and only recently then have you also seen it. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Any other comments, questions? Anyone else from the public? Okay. Well, Kevin, thank you for giving that update. Next, I would like to give an update on the discussion related to our recommendations related to speed and traffic on the 300 block of Munson. Related to this, we talked some about the the crosswalks that were going on State Road. So I'm going to start with Kevin has a little bit more information about that, which was tied in to how this conversation started. So I'm going to let him do an update on that, and then we'll dive into the rest of this topic.
Great, thanks, Commissioner. I just really wanted to circle back because there was a lot of discussion last month about what was actually planned to go in on that Grove State Road crosswalk. So I just wanted to show you what the latest schematic is that's going to be done, we're planning to do out there, which would be adding the curb bump outs, at each corner to shorten a little bit the pedestrian length walking across the crosswalk, still maintaining, the 12-foot lanes and I think a varying, but between 8 and 10, 11-foot shoulder. Adding the crosswalk across State, adding the crosswalk across Munson, and then adding the curb features to try to get traffic to kind of slow down a little bit there while still allowing appropriate turn radiuses for the vehicles. Would also include the rapid rectangular flashing beacons, the pedestrian turn a button on and the lights flash on the State Road part of that crosswalk. But there was a lot of discussion last month about is it 4 crosswalks, 2 crosswalks, which side it's going on and the like. So I just wanted to provide that to you to clear that up so there wasn't any misunderstanding about what we're planning to put out there.
That's a Canal Street.
No, it's at Grove and Munson. We're Grove and Munson across State. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, can I make a comment? Kevin, I have concern about those sidewalk bump outs. I think wherever we have those bump outs along the streets in town, we're taking away parking and we're making it more difficult for people to park in the spaces that are available. So I think in a way, we may want to, avoid those.
The problem on that corner with parking so close to the corner is visibility and sight lines for the cars crossing the street. So the bump out, to me, makes it safer because it moves the cars back away from the intersection and improves the sight lines. Having spent some time walking across there over the past 15 years and driving and trying to see out past the cars going up to the VFW.
I concur, that's the biggest problem at that intersection, is the bushes and having to pull out far enough to be able to see what's coming down the street, I think, but that could be accommodated by having people trim their shrubs or, delineating, yellow lines along the curb that people can't park that close to the intersection. You don't necessarily have to have the bump outs to prevent it. I'm just thinking on down the road that the bump outs, they take away street space and congest things.
Well, bump outs in my world perform a service of traffic calming, just like we talked about on Munson Street with the boxes around the driveway aprons. So the bump out there narrows the space, has the effect of slowing the cars down, which some people have expressed concern on State Road that people are going too fast. Although again, I think it's pretty well policed and it's not really that big of a deal, but bump outs have become more and more common to calm traffic.
But I think we ought to think about bump outs also interfere with parking, and I'm thinking about delivery truck parking. Like they need long sections where they can easily pull in, pull out, and when they have those bump outs on Rehoboth Avenue or other places, that limits how they can park or how we can create parking for them. So I'm just thinking, those bump outs, they cause a problem, and especially on Rehoboth Avenue, and if it were happening on Baltimore and Wilmington, but just keep having that in mind, I just think, well, we maybe want to keep that in mind for other streets also, and not create problems.
I appreciate what you're saying. I think, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, this is we have no control over this. This is DelDOT. It's their road.
It's
their
their
project.
road, but we proposed to them what we were gonna do.
Okay.
You know, so they didn't specify you have to have a bump out, not have a bump out, so.
And this being on the very residential part of State Road, there are no businesses that are getting deliveries or anything in this area.
I think it also allows the pedestrian to pause that extra second. You know, instead of just walking out to the road and then looking, you go to the bump out and then you look to make sure it's safe to cross the road.
But also, I think where we've created bump outs, like, it impedes bicyclists. It creates a much more narrow space for a car and a bicycle. And I think I've heard negative feedback about the narrowing of the streets there on Lake behind City Hall here, and that those areas and those turns are so narrow. So
We missed an opportunity there a few years ago, but we were transmitting and it was not being received. Here, if those bump outs were full car width, then in most jurisdictions, they do get a bike pathway through the middle of the bump out. So those are relatively shallow. If they were deeper, then generally what happens is there is a pathway for the cyclist in the middle of the bump out. That particular stretch of road is really relatively wide, and being next to the bump out there is not really going to create much of a problem at all on a bicycle.
But it's just, I just say, hey, skip them for the time being, you know? I mean, I would hate to bike down there. I bike in that direction, and like, hey, if it's a car, several cars and me biking and all that, I'm gonna be more worried about being able to stay safe from the cars or accommodate the cars, you know?
With the bushes gone, it actually makes us more visible.
Well,
So anyway, that's,
thank you.
and I go back to the shortened walking distance, which is also a bonus. Less time out there in the middle of the street.
All right, thank you for those comments. Thank you, Kevin, for making the presentation.
Can
I'm gonna-
I just ask one more question?
Sure.
Where did those bump outs come from? They're not there now,
Correct,
so you're going to create bump outs?
correct, all that
And
highlighted
whose
area.
idea was that?
Our designers,
Who?
our designers, design
Oh.
engineer.
Walter, I'm just going to finish this agenda item, and we'll get to you for public comment before it ends.
I'd like to comment on this item.
It's all part of the same topic, so we'll get to you right before we finish. So related to this topic and what this is related to everything we heard about traffic over there on State Road and the through traffic down Munson. This committee made recommendations for the mayor and commissioner for some things to help. And I just want to go over a few of that. So if there's any changes or feedback from you guys or from the public, I can take that, and the commissioners will be hearing our recommendations tomorrow's meeting at 2 p.m. So these are the three items that identified there being a problem, and that's the length of the 300 block of Munson without there being a stop sign or a cross street, the lack of speed signs, the lack of visualization of the roadway, of traffic lanes and driveway boxes, as well as and I need to add this here, I forgot, the width of the street is much wider than other roads in Rehoboth. I believe it's 38 feet instead of 33 is approximately the width. A little bit of background, I took directly from some of the correspondence that we received from Mr. Galanti and his neighbors. as well as some of the statistics that the traffic reader calculated in terms of speed and volume of traffic over those periods of times it was there. Identifying the evaluation criteria. We evaluated the high speeds of moving vehicles, reckless driving, and passing of moving vehicles. All pose a significant threat to pedestrian and other driver safety, as well as diminishes the quality of life for residents on that block. We analyzed 4 short-term and 3 long-term recommendations, as well as correspondence from the neighbors, as well as a subject matter expert. And then finally, these are the 4 recommendations that we are making to the mayor and commissioners. That the city install 2 speed signs at the beginning of each side of the 300 block of Munson Street. That the city paint a double yellow line in the middle of the street to increase the visualization to reduce traffic speed and deter unsafe passing. That the city paint driveway blocks to increase visualization and decrease traffic speeds. And that we install 2 speed reader signs in the middle of each block for each direction of traffic to make drivers aware of speed and reduce their traffic speed. All of the costs are pretty minimal, with the exception of the installation of 2 speed reader signs, which would be approximately $5,000 each. So this is what I am submitting to the mayor and commissioners and will be presenting tomorrow. So any comments, questions? Did I get anything wrong from our discussion at the last meeting?
I have one edit for you.
Yeah.
Put the word limit between speed and signs. Just to be perfectly clear.
Perfectly clear. Thank you for that. If there's no other comments, we'll take comments from the public.
Well, I'm wondering about the double yellow line. So none of the other streets in the area have double yellow lines. I don't know what that's going to accomplish. I agree that people do speed. I drive that very regularly. And I have been passed on that street, which I thought was, out of bounds. But I don't know if yellow lines are going to keep them from passing you.
Well, this is what this committee recommended at the last meeting.
Did they?
I
Okay,
certainly
I
don't
wasn't
want to
here.
re-argue.
Needed you last time.
I just want to make sure that I've articulated what we decided well at the last meeting.
And everybody agreed to that, all that?
Yes.
Agreed.
Even a double yellow line?
Yeah.
Okay.
The public advocated for it.
Members of the public, Walter, do you want to come up? Oh, I'm sorry. Hoyt. Just identify your name and relationship to the city, please.
Hoyt Decker. I'm in the 200 block of Laurel Street, and thank you for hearing my comments. I'm sorry, I'm like Johnny come lately here. I just became aware of your deliberations on the Munson Street issue when I read about it in the paper here a few weeks ago. But I'd like to share with you a statement that I've drafted, and I'll give it to you later on. I don't know if I'm going to need these or not. In July 2021, I wrote to the mayor and commissioners concerning speed limits in the city. I recommended that reducing limits to 20 miles per hour. Although I received responses from the mayor and then city manager, as well as several commissioners, plus an email from the Rehoboth Beach Police Department, no serious consideration was given to my concerns. Recently, I became aware that the city and the city's Streets and Transportation Committee was addressing the concerns of homeowners on Munson Street who complained of frequent instances of speeding on the street. Several recommendations were made to alleviate the problem, and I guess that's what you've just been discussing. And the committee is now considering these suggestions, and I guess tomorrow you're going to report on it. I'm here today to again advocate for lowering of speed limits. The issues being addressed by the Streets and Transportation Committee go beyond Munson Street. Speeding is a widespread problem throughout the city, including where I live on Laurel Street. In response to my 2021 letter, I was told that there were impediments to municipalities altering state-mandated speed limits. I was told that other towns were interested in taking such action, and there was some talk of an initiative by a coalition of these cities to change the restrictions. Similar to what the committee was told by Chief Banks, in my email from the police department's representative, it stated in part, quote, while we have a police department, while we as a police department try to address any and all speed problems, areas with enforcement efforts, it has been very challenging at best this year. Our complaint loads are up, and our normal seasonal cadet personnel, which can handle minor complaints, is half of what it was last year. In other words, 2020. 13 was the number given. End quote. As I reviewed last year's responses to me, I was motivated to pursue the state's role in speed regulation. I contacted the DelDOT Information Unit, and I learned that the state authority is limited to state-maintained roadways. I was told that the establishment of, again, quote, the establishment of speed limits by municipalities are solely left up to the municipality for state-maintained streets. So thus, as I understand it, the city, if so inclined, does have the authority to make changes to most of the residential streets in Rehoboth Beach. Last year, one commissioner informed me that a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit is posted on Canal Street. However, another member of the Board of Commissioners stated, quote, the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on Canal Street is a, quote, feel-good, end quote, speed limit and is not enforceable, end quote. Other than state-maintained streets like Rehoboth Avenue, State Road, Bayard Avenue, I don't know whether Canal or other streets are state-maintained at this point, but nevertheless, what I believe is pertinent is the fact that most most side streets in Dewey Beach and Fenwick Island are set at 15 miles per hour. I have some pictures here that I'm going to give to you too. I believe there are steps that can be taken to reduce the speed limits in residential areas. However, reduced speed limits will require increased enforcement. And that means more staff for the Rehoboth Beach Police Department. Their limitations, as I noted earlier, should be a topic of discussion during the upcoming budgeting process. One or more full-time, at least additional seasonal officers who are qualified to enforce these issues should be explored. As the Streets and Transportation Committee has found on Munson Street, there are other traffic issues like street width, as you just discussed, that have a significant impact. Similarly, on streets like Laurel, increased on-street parking, which significantly narrows the travel lanes, raises the risk of accidents, especially with the explosion of bicycle use, something the city has promoted with its installation of street signage. Anybody can say that. Another result of the crowded streets and more bicycle increased use is the use of bicycles on sidewalks, which is generally a violation of a city ordinance. Therefore, I urge the Streets and Transportation Committee, and I realize I'm late, maybe just a note tomorrow, to study this matter and forward it to the Board of Commissioners, and where hopefully it will receive more consideration. Thank you. I just have an item or two additional remarks about what you're intending to do tomorrow, and I'm going to state that there's two issues that seem to be missing in your recommendation. One is that all of these recommendations are passive. There's nothing proactive taking place here. And secondly, there's no enforcement component to what you're considering here. And again, I think that needs to be considered in the next budget go-around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hoy. And I thank you very much for your comments. I'm not going to allow any discussion of citywide speed limits and/or need for additional enforcement, because it's not on the agenda. And I think it does warrant further discussion by this committee. But we do have other items on the agenda that we have deferred several times now, and I don't want to take up too much time, as well as any recommendations from a budgetary standpoint and enforcement standpoint that this committee may want to recommend. So I'm going to defer. I appreciate your comments, but I'm going to defer any comment for them for right now. Walter?
Walter Birmingham, 123 Rehoboth Avenue, backing up bump outs. Appreciating the comments about bump outs, reminding you the past comments about on King Charles wanting bump outs to get the people out to the point beyond where the angled parking is and or the parallel parking, so that you can see the people, that they're not assembling behind the cars and all of a sudden they step out, they're in front of the cars. So when you have a bump out on the state road that is no further out than the car is parking parallel on state road, a person gets a chance, rather than being back at the curb, they are up to 5 or so feet out, that people coming from the west towards Rehoboth Avenue, towards the Seahorse, can see people standing there that they wish to cross when somebody does push the light. And giving you a real example of that, if you go in Rehoboth Avenue and across from Lingo's, when you first approach, there is no parking on the left. So you can see a person standing there having pushed the button, and you can see that they're there and they wish to cross. But when you come from 2nd Street and go westbound, on the opposite side of the street, there's cars parked right up against the island, and the people are hidden behind the cars. So the bump outs are very, very good. Donna, you mean well in what you're saying, but in this case, the bump out needs to be there and exposes the people. The state road is plenty wide, and the bicycles have the right to be on what's left of the shoulder and or the right lane of the highway, so nobody's inconvenienced and actually safety is enhanced. Mr. Chair, I understand you're saying we analyzed. I guess you're saying we, the committee? You said we analyzed. Is that we, the committee? Because we don't have a copy of what was not in the documentation, I don't believe, was it?
Yeah, it is not yet embedded. This was just a draft for me to send to the mayor and commissioners
Okay,
for
thank
tomorrow
you.
meetings.
The other thing I would like to think that you didn't argue at the last meeting, that you discussed it, because I think that you did a very good job of exposing it. The other thing that I'd like to point out, as I did last time, the blocks at the edges of the driveways are access to the driveways, reminding you that they're not parking spaces. The police department is very liberal. If you have control of the vehicle that's parked in that block, they probably won't mess with it. But otherwise, if somebody's parked there, they can be towed. And typically the policy, excuse the sarcasm, if you could drive up and over that vehicle and get out of your driveway, they're not going to do too much. But the department has been pretty good about that. And I don't see where the boxes are necessary, but I do agree. And the reason for the double line is if you don't have a double line, it could be passing on one side but not on the other. So when you put the double line, it means passing from neither direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter.
Close, Mr. Chief? Thank you.
Thank you both for your public comments. Anyone else from the public? Mr. Decker, I would just ask if you could, I know your comments were written, would you be able to email those to me? So actually, I gave a copy to Ann. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments regarding our recommendations for the 300 block of Munson Street at this point? Okay, like I said, it will be discussed tomorrow at 2 p.m. here in this room. Next on the agenda is to get an update on a recommendation that this committee made. I believe it was sometime at the end of 2021 to put a silent policeman on Newcastle and King Charles Avenue. And Dave, do you want to give an update on your observations of the success or lack thereof?
I do,
of that?
thank you. So I believe it was in December of '21 or January of this year, I had recommended that we put the silent policeman out there because of the difficulty of crossing that road. And everybody in the committee agreed that we voted on, agreed to that. And Kevin thankfully made that happen. And just compared this year to last year is an enormous difference. So it has cut down the speeding as I cross to walk down Newcastle to go to the beach. I have not almost gotten run over 5 or 6 times this year. Cars actually see you coming out. The sign is in the middle of the road, so I believe that right away they see something in the middle of the road and they're like, oh, well, there's a crosswalk here, so I'm going to slow down. So like I said, just to wrap it up, this is an enormous change and it's a great improvement. And whether we want to talk about it at a future time, whether we want to add a couple more, I understand you can't have it on every street, understand that, but it works. From my observation, it works very well, and a lot of other neighbors on the street have said the exact same thing. Thank you.
What street was it, Dave?
That was on Newcastle and King Charles.
Any other comments or observations on that? I think we're happy to hear that it's been successful.
Right,
They work.
yeah, more proof.
With that, I'm going to go to the next agenda item, which is the discussion of parking and unloading of delivery vehicles and the impact on traffic flow. This topic was brought up several years ago. I think that at the time, the city manager met with several business owners, and there was a lot of apprehension to do much at that time. So Donna, you have wanted to discuss this topic again. So we've got it on the agenda. Since this was put on the agenda, we did receive correspondence from the fire department saying that generally the increase in traffic in the city has become very concerning to them. The amount of delivery vehicles blocking roadways is concerning to them. And that enforcement is, or lack of enforcement is concerning to them. So this, that letter from the fire department will be embedded. I believe it's embedded already in the correspondence for tomorrow's meeting, and it will be put in the correspondence for today's meeting as well. With that, Donna, I'll let you take it off.
Okay.
I've got up on the screen here, parking and travel lanes as being the first.
Okay. One, thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, glad we're having the opportunity to discuss this. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, I would like to preface this with a couple things. That if we decide as a committee to pursue trying to improve the situation with delivery trucks parking in the travel lane, if we decide to pursue that, I would recommend that we go about it very gently. And my reason for that is that from what's happened in the past, that this is a complicated topic, and it's been an especially difficult 2 years for the shop owners and the police. And so they've been struggling the last 2 years, and so I don't think we want to encourage any abrupt changes. So I'm thinking that, as I've said before, we start a conversation, we take our time in exploring this and looking at this. Secondly, I just want to say that I don't have any personal motivation behind this. This doesn't affect me. I mean, I can take care of myself well. The reason I brought this up is simply, here we are, we're donating our time or volunteering our time to the city. And I just think, you know, while we're doing it, we should address critical issues. And I think this is a critical issue and worthy of our attention. And I don't think I'm a glutton for punishment, but, you know, I know it's a tough issue, but I guess I'd feel bad about myself if I backed away from an issue just because it's tough, okay? So that's why I'm just think we go ahead and we look at this. Now, when we brought this up before, Ed had asked that I check out what other cities are doing. So I did check out with Lewis, and Lewis in their code, they prominently designate parking zones throughout town. They have a list of parking areas, and that commercial vehicles have 20 minutes in that area plus 10 more minutes to conduct business. And that passenger vehicles can use those unloading zones for unloading passengers for 10, 15 minutes, I think, or if it's, but they have to get out of there. So that's roughly what Lewis does. I also checked with Bethany, and Bethany's rules were they require that commercial areas provide loading zones. If they're of a certain size, if it's over 2,500 or, well, I can't remember the exact figures, but in some areas they have to, the larger ones outside the core of Bethany have to provide a commercial unloading zone on the property. And I called the parking director there in Bethany to sort of check, well, what happens? Like, how do you deal with these things with people parking in the travel lanes and things like that? And the unique thing about Bethany is, he pointed out, is that they have 2 alleyways that run parallel to Garfield Parkway. And so that the delivery vehicles often use the alleyways, and that now they may block traffic there, but that's okay. But it made me think that we do have one alleyway of such, that is the Wilmington extension that runs behind the library and down to Scarborough. Okay, so then that's when after I talked with those folks, I thought, well, what is Rehoboth doing? I'd never seen them. So that's when I brought up the code, search for the codes for Rehoboth. And I was surprised with what I found. And can you enlarge that a little bit so people, I don't know. Oh,
I'll do it.
yeah, if you can make it.
Let me go on this side.
Sure.
So you can speak on that side.
Yeah. If you can, okay.
Oh,
Yeah, good. Make them, so they'll all be bigger. They'll look bigger even. Okay. Can you guys see that? Read it? Want it bigger?
No, we can see it.
It's good.
Well, John, can you see it?
yes.
You're okay? All righty. Thanks. And-
I'm going to stay here so I can.
Oh, okay, that's right, okay. Yeah, in case I need to refer to it. Okay. So here we have this, and the ordinance that has been the longstanding is that no vehicle shall park in any portion of the vehicle travel lane on any street within the corporate limits of the city. B, any person violating this section shall upon conviction pay a fine not less than 50, no more than 100, and shall pay the cost of prosecution, provided that with the consent of the person charged with a violation under this section, the chief of police is authorized to accept and receive, without hearing, no less than $50 as a penalty. If such penalty is paid within 7 days, or $75 if the violation is paid within 30, or $100 if it's paid after 30 days, okay? Part C, the police officer, while in the performance of his duty, may remove or cause to be removed any vehicle parked in any portion of the vehicle travel lane at the expense of the owner or operator or such motor vehicle, when the owner or operator is unable, unwilling, or unavailable to move such a motor vehicle immediately. Okay, so that's what's on the code for parking in the travel lanes. There's no parking in travel lanes in anywhere in the city. Okay. Now, so I went on to look what else Rehoboth has, and, thank you, there is designated loading zones. This was news to me. And it says that hereby establish the following areas for loading and unloading materials from vehicles engaged in the transportation of freight, merchandise, or cargo of any kind. And then it goes on to list 16 designated loading and unloading zones in the city, okay? Now, it's a little bit hard to read this, how they identify them, but they're usually they're along the whole length of the boardwalk at the end of Rehoboth Avenue. There's one at First and Rehoboth Avenue. So they're scattered throughout town, but there are 16 of them. Now, this surprised me. I wasn't aware that there were 16 loading zones. And I couldn't remember seeing that. And I know that some I thought I'd seen, I didn't see them anymore. And I'm kind of used to seeing they're painted red and labeled as loading. So I called the head of parking, which is June, and asked June, and talked with her about this issue and wanted to verify, do these 16 loading zones exist? I didn't know if, and she said, yes, that the code is up to date. These 16 loading zones exist. And in the conversation, I asked, well, if a new driver takes over a delivery route, how does he know where these loading zones are? And I said, well, do they call and ask you, or do you have a handout that would tell new drivers, here are the possible loading and unloading zones? She goes, never been asked, never been asked. And there's no such handout or anything online to tell new drivers where to park. Okay, now, and I think what it is that there's not been extensive enforcement, and I think actually what's come is that most drivers just assume in Rehoboth you park in the travel lane. I think that's kind of the going assumption. Okay. Now the other thing, can we go to the next about time restriction?
This is it. That's it. It's up on the screen.
Okay, time restrictions. Okay, now there's one part in here I did not fully understand. I think the wording is weird and we need clarification on that. It's item A. The loading and unloading of freight, merchandise, or cargo of any kind shall be restricted for a 24-hour day during the months when the parking meters are in effect. And I think what that is trying to say is when there's a designated loading and unloading zone, that loading and unloading is in effect for 24 hours every day. And I don't know, is that correct, Chief? Is that how you interpret that? I think that's what that's saying. Loading and unloading of freight and cargo of any kind shall be restricted for a 24-hour day during the months when the parking meters are in effect. So I think it's like that unloading is available at those zones 24 hours. Okay, and there it's making the distinction between seasons, high seasons when the meters are on and when the meters aren't on, okay? So then, after I talked with June, and we had a little discussion. Well, I reached out and I had a meeting with Chief Banks and Lieutenant Sullivan. Okay, we had a very productive, helpful, thoughtful meeting that went over an hour or so. This is a month or so ago. And Chief Banks has a lot of insight into this and a lot of good ideas, which at some point he can share. Now, my feeling is at this point, as we look at this or discuss this, is that I'm not invested now in any particular solution. I know previously we talked about, well, have the big trucks in and out by a certain time frame. I'm sort of backing off. I think it's a little premature for us to talk about any particular solutions. I think for us to make any headway on this is that we need to involve all the groups individually who would be affected by this. Okay, like particularly, I think we may want to have a couple of us, as Ed suggested, that we reach out and set up a meeting with Main Street, with the executive director of Main Street, and talk with them about this. Do they see this as a problem? Is it such a problem they'd be willing to work on it? Do they have ideas, solicit their ideas, brainstorm our ideas together? I think we do the same thing with the Chamber of Commerce. I think we want to talk to Kevin about what's in the city works, how that might be affected. I think we want to talk with the group looking at the streetscapes for Wilmington and Baltimore. I've not been involved with them in any way myself. I think, and the truck drivers who come in, now we think that they would be amenable to whatever we tell them, or saying this is it, and now I hear the fire, volunteer fire people are concerned and raising the issue, and so we would want to talk with them. So I have asked Chief Banks in our discussion, I asked if when the high season's over, if the police or parking could verify those 16 spots. What is the condition and the status of those 16 designated loading zones? And Chief Banks and I talked about those. Maybe those areas could be painted and put signage up to make them more prominent. Maybe we could have a list to let new drivers know where to go. That might be part of it. So I think that could happen in the fall, September, October, hopefully. We could verify those spots. But I think at this point, what I'd recommend is that we decide, do we want to pursue this topic? And if we do, I think that we would want to have a small subcommittee, maybe just 2 or 3, and that we would set up these meetings with Main Street, Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, the other groups. We'd set up those meetings and talk with them and share ideas and see if people are willing to work on this together. The other important group are the commissioners. We've got to get the commissioners on board. So I think with this project, it's like everybody has to buy in. They have to buy in that it is a problem and they're willing to do some things or give a little to work it out, and that we're all working together. And I think it's a tough thing. I sort of see it, if our committee did this, we're just doing a lot of the footwork for the commissioners and other groups. We're just giving some time to explore this with all these different groups and to see if we can, and because I think the ultimate solution is going to be numerous tweaks and a package of different changes, okay? And Kevin, this is where I came onto the idea about the curb bump out, that if we wanted to create more parking space for the big trucks, okay, it would be easy for them if they can just pull right in at an intersection, They don't have to back up their semis or whatever. It's so that what it might entail would be at some intersection, we maybe take out the bump out so that a large loading zone could be put there, that a truck could easily back in and back out to use that loading zone. So that's why, where the idea, maybe we could, maybe to create some better loading zones, we might want to take out some bump outs to create it, okay? Okay, so that's kind of where I stand or the thinking I put into this and what I present to you and your ideas.
Donna, thank you so much for putting in all of that hard work. One, I just want to make the comment that we cannot create a subcommittee without still having the meetings here in this room and them being televised and recorded, just because of FOIA. We can have one point person that coordinates meeting with all of these people, and that's perfectly fine. But once we create a group or a task force, it creates a whole nother.
Well, I'd be willing to be that point person as long as other people could occasionally go with me. I could set up the meeting if I could reach out to other committee members and say, would you go along with me to this meeting? Just so, would that be acceptable?
Yeah, we just need to make sure that we're doing it in a proper way.
Okay.
And get input from the city solicitor. That being said, I think it's very important to get input from Main Street and the Chamber and various types of businesses. I understand, personally, my thought is, I know there's, for 350 businesses, there are 16 different loading zones throughout the city. But when a big tractor trailer is delivering tons and tons of meat and wine and food, you just can't expect that they're able to track that a block, down the street to whatever business they're going to. So I don't know how utilizing the loading zones as being the only solution and enforcement of double, parking in the traffic lane is not acceptable enforcement. I just don't know how practical that is.
Well, I think that's a good point, I think we should probably, one of the solutions, I think, in the package might be creating more large parking areas for big trucks, for the semis. Maybe being able to do one per block, like if we could have one in the second block, one in the third block. I don't know. Or if not, some other solution for that. Maybe it does become a time matter, So I think it'd be a combination of things, and I think it's good to know this and to be open to various solutions. So, but I think exactly, we need to talk with Main Street, hopefully and the Chamber of Commerce, I think, to get their input, and because I think, it's going to affect people, and I think the reason Main Street and Chamber of Commerce might be willing to work on this is that for PR. I think, Main Street's always talking about, being integrated with businesses and residents and throughout town. And I think this would be a way maybe they can help out the whole town by working together to create a better traffic flow in town. I think that would be a huge service for the public. And so I think there's some hopefully they might have that motivation to help out, because I'm sure it'll be a sacrifice and an inconvenience in some ways. But what solutions could come up that might minimize that? And I think the thing to get us through this is the vision of what might happen. And, we have to think, how would it be if really delivery trucks weren't parking on the travel lanes of Rehoboth Avenue or Baltimore or Wilmington, and both the lanes could be used for visitors, guests, And I think imagining that, what it could be, is what would get us through working out all these details.
I ask a question? The loading zones, how big are they?
Well, they vary. I mean, we'd have, it's a little hard for, I didn't read through all the exact details. They vary in length. Some are 35, the one at the boardwalk specified at like 135. So they vary in length where they are.
A box truck could get in one. I'm thinking most of them are van-sized.
The vast majority are just individual parking spots.
Right.
So if you look at Candy Kitchen, they have one right in front of there. They have a fairly large that barely fits in there, so they'd use that a lot. But certainly the trucks aren't going to fit in any of the.
That's what my thinking was, that they don't apply to any of the trucks. They might apply to a car or a van, maybe.
That's correct.
Well, the one on the boardwalk is for the semis, the big semis. That's where they park. And I think some are I think there may be one that's 35 feet someplace. I mean, Chief Banks,
So generally speaking, they're not acceptable for a typical delivery truck. They're of no value to a delivery truck.
You're talking about the ones up by the boardwalk?
There's 16 of them,
Well,
and my
there's
guess
two
is
right
that
at
most
the
of them,
boardwalk that were created when they did streetscape. But they really, as somebody was saying here, if you were at the other end of the first block of Rehoboth Avenue, it's a long way to haul your stuff.
correct.
But if you're up at that end, that's where they should park. And I have asked people to do that before, and they've said to me, oh, I didn't even know they were there. But there are, there's one on each side of the street, and they can take care of those businesses.
So we have small loading zones that are of no utility.
well, they have some, like you think about panel trucks, they could probably get in there, But one of our solutions might be, we might take 2 pull-in parking spaces and put them together and create a wider loading zone. Like that could help.
So then you'd have the situation where you'd ask the business owner, are you willing to give up one of those 30-minute spots in front of your place of business in order to make it easier for people to deliver to your business so you have product to sell?
Well, you know what I think, Dave? Hey, that's a perfect fit. Those 30-minute spots for customers, that's what delivery people need, and they're right there where the shops want them. Why can't those 30-minute spots be for delivery trucks as well as customers?
So-
They're both coming and going within 30 minutes.
So if we got a map of the existing loading zones, and we got a map of the 30-minute spaces, then we have something to go to Main Street and the Chamber with and say, okay, which would you prefer? Because you can't have your trucks parking in the street.
Right? Or why couldn't they be both? Why couldn't it be customers and delivery trucks in the 30-minute slot?
If the truck driver makes a delivery appointment, that's great.
If the truck.
That's not too likely.
Wait,
Well, also,
You don't know when they're coming.
if a huge delivery truck comes in, like a big Cisco truck,
oh, yeah.
you can't park in those 30 minutes because it's sticking out into the avenue.
Yeah, there's no way.
Absolutely. I know. We need to create more spaces for them.
Yeah.
There's one current one, and they park around town, but yeah, I think we need to make more spaces for them someplace. Find places where we could, like, I think the city can look at where the city has space, like the city parking lot. That's convenient there to Baltimore and the second and third blocks. Maybe there could be a semi-space there in the city lot, maybe for a designated period of time. I mean, these might be time limited. But like I say, I don't think these are all good ideas. I mean, these are all critical things to think through.
So if we know the lay of the land, we can make better recommendations.
Yeah, I think the police know the best. I think if they could check the status of those 16 designated spots and let us know exactly where they are, how long they are, how they're marked, maybe we need pictures. If we had that, and they will know, and I really think Chief Banks and the police, they know where best to recommend creating better spots or more. They know this, and so if
If you ride your bike around here about 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm sure you do, I do, you see all
not
kinds of
quite.
parking
That's a-
places. A
that's
lot
a
of
little-
times, as a matter of fact, I'm riding my bike through the parking areas that are not parked because that's safer than being out in the middle of Rehoboth Avenue. No bike should be on Rehoboth Avenue unless they can do that. That's my opinion. But at any rate, If you do that, there's all kinds of parking places. Now, Ed mentioned that this has gone through before, and it has. We had a big discussion. The thing is, if you get there early in the morning, you don't have all the regular traffic, you can park those trucks. And when we talked to the trucking companies, they were all amenable to that. They had no problem with that at all. The people that had the problem were the businesses, because they had to get employees to come in and take care of that stuff early in the morning. They didn't want to have them there early in the morning. So that's really where the difficulty is the difficulty of the timing of when these things
Right.
can be parked.
And we could just throw out there for that issue, like the chief was telling me, or someone was telling me, they know delivery people who have the keys to get into some stores. The owners give them the keys. They go in early in the morning, and probably with security cameras, a lot of stores could trust the delivery people, go in and just leave the stuff inside the door. So that's one possible solution. I've sort of thought of, if this becomes really onerous for some people and they couldn't give them their keys or be there within a certain amount of time, this could create a business in town. Maybe there could be a business that would come in and accept deliveries for shop owners early morning deliveries when the shop owners don't want to be there. So that could create jobs. Now, I think that's something to float with Main Street and the Chamber. And that's sort of what happened with the trash can, to make sure they got off the street earlier and put out, weren't on the street all the time. That created businesses around town. But
So,
So if I could, go ahead.
yeah,
Or you
go,
want me to?
please, go ahead.
So I appreciate Donna's work on this. She's very passionate about this. I just have a couple of comments to make on this. So back in 2014, we found the notes for the meeting I'm sorry, November 24th of 2014, that there was a meeting between the city manager and a bunch of the businesses. They had discussion about it, and I had asked Evan if he had any notes on it. The basic premise there, the basic answer was the businesses just didn't approve of this. So we talked about a budget, talked about a detailed study that was going to be done. So and in the minutes it talks about that there's an excessive cost to that. So I don't think anything went forward with that. So we have talked about that previously. The other thing is, Donna, we were looking up when you talked about the businesses of people possibly creating a business. So there's OSHA rules, there's Department of Transportation rules. It gets very complicated. Now, I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but there's limits on how far a trucker can truck his material from. He's got a certain distance, I believe, that.
I think that's only unionized people, right?
Well, yeah, but
No,
I don't know.
DOT's involved in where these guys go and how long they're on the road, absolutely.
DOT and
And
OSHA,
it's all in the cloud, so they can't cheat anymore,
right.
which is a whole nother problem.
Well, Chief Banks was aware of unionized drivers have that, but that was the only one he'd mentioned.
Well, again, there's
Okay, but you're right.
OSHA rules,
So
and there's Department of Transportation rules that we'd have to look into. And I would agree with you, if we talk about creating more loading zones, we should go out and do that work for the police. We should take pictures of all those spots, and because you have where they are right now, I believe. There was in your email, it showed where those spots were. So someone from
They're
this.
describing it, if we read the description correctly.
Yeah, the description is not, my wife and I were walking around town, we were looking for these spots. So I believe the committee should go out and do some of that homework. If we're suggesting that we want to go forward on this, that we need to do the work on that and not throw it on the police department to have to go out and take those. We should take those pictures, we should walk around town, we should look at the lengths of them. And like Kevin had mentioned, there's just no room. If you've ever driven a semi-truck or a large military vehicle, you need a large spot to pull in, because they have to drive in, and with one driver, they do not like to back up for fear of running someone over. Generally, they want a second guy when you start backing up.
That's why you have spaces at 6 o'clock in the morning. You can pull into those places because there's nobody in those spots anyway.
Right, but once again, you have to get the merchants to
It's a
approve to
staffing
that.
issue.
And
That's right.
And it's a staffing issue, it's a cost issue. So, and the last comment on this, and I think we could explore it, but to move forward on something like this, we have, in my mind, we need a comprehensive traffic study. Just, the city commissioners wouldn't approve a no left turn lane that will be suggested, or no left turn on First Street. They wouldn't even extend it by a month, because they said in the meeting, because I sat here and watched it, it was that they wanted a comprehensive study on traffic in Rehoboth, not just piecemealing things. So again, this would be a piecemeal, so we'd have to do, I would recommend, if we're gonna go forth with this, then we need to do a lot of research on it, and we have to do a study. Because there's no way we can just come up with these grand ideas, because the commissioners will do the same thing. They'll say, well, you're piecemealing things. So
Well,
that's just my
how
opinion.
about this, Dave? I think that's an important point, all of that, you know? And I guess my thought was, we need to start talking with the commissioners, maybe individually. Not that we're not far enough along, I don't think, to take it to the whole commission, but I think those of us who know commissioners sort of touch base, where are they going, are they open? And I think, you know, and I know we're going to talk next on the agenda about getting a study. But I think we could be doing a lot of legwork for the commissioners and trying to get cooperation generated around town. Oh, I think why the commissioners could do this now is the city budget is good. I mean, look how they've raised parking rates. I think the city could afford to give up a few more parking spaces for loading zones, okay? And and I think they would like this solution. I think if we do a lot of the legwork and make it, and it's a coordinated, I mean, if we went in and Main Street and maybe somebody else went in proposing this and endorsing it to the commissioners, I think we could move a long way on it.
And you also have the fire department.
Yes, get
And
the
I
fire,
think
and
that
let me,
that's
and
pretty powerful. I would think safety in this letter is pretty
Yeah.
powerful. The other thing I was thinking about, a lot, you know, town's a lot busier than it was 8 years ago. I mean, which is
Yes,
why they're writing this
exactly.
letter now.
right.
I wonder if they were involved back in 2014. Do you see anything there?
The minutes don't say that.
Don't
It
say
ju-
that,
It just
yeah.
talks about that they met
Right.
with Sharon Lynn.
Right, right. Right, and the other thing that complicates affects the police and the fire department is, in the median of the Rehoboth Avenue, that bricked area by the mailbox drop, that's opposite the fire station, okay? That's a pull-in. I saw a big semi parked there, and I thought, oh, gee, that's another unloading zone. Okay, so I went over and I looked. Wrong. It's an area that is marked for parking for only volunteer firemen who come to respond to calls. But here, we've got semis parking there. And also for the safety issue, this one got me. I was heading out of town, and I went through the circle going west, and as I went around, here was a semi parked in the middle of the lanes right there. You know where there's that yellow arrow to turn into Main Street and the information? There was a semi parked just beyond that yellow arrow heading toward facing the lighthouse. And he had his bed lowered, and he was, I assume, delivering eggs. But that looked like a very dangerous place.
There's a couple of things that we should keep in mind. Staffing is an issue across all business areas. Truck drivers, staffing at the businesses. Computers now, computer software routes the trucks because fuel is incredibly expensive. So the computer runs the route for the driver. The driver gets a load, the driver gets a route, the driver follows that route to minimize time between stops. So it'd be great if they could come here first, but we're not talking to their computer. What we can do is provide the business owner, who you've now learned, the truck driver is someone that in many cases they see every single day. They're part of the family business. So they're on a first name basis. They know a lot about each other. It's not that difficult for the business owner to say, hey, there's a new sheriff in town, her name is Donna Mabry, and she wants you to park here. Because,
Right.
because that information's, my guess is that information's not been provided
Exactly.
to any of the business owners. We have a pathway to the business owners through both Main Street and the chamber. But I don't think we can change when these people get here.
I don't think so either.
That's going to be very difficult.
Right.
Because again, if fuel were $1 a gallon, it wouldn't matter. They'd come here first, fine, no problem, I can go wherever I want. But it's not. So let's use the avenues that we have available to us, which is providing the information to the business owner. He in turn provides it to his, in many cases, close friend who's the driver and say, hey, we got to keep this stuff in mind because I don't want to see you getting a ticket. And particularly if they get dinged on their CDL, which was mentioned earlier, it comes back upon the driver.
Exactly.
And none of these firms want to have their drivers at risk because in many cases, they're virtually irreplaceable. There's a tremendous labor shortage, particularly in less than truckload or LTL, that world, and over the road, long haul. It's hard to get drivers. Keith knows about it. Keith knows about it from his staffing issues. All these industries have difficulties. So our business owners want to get their things to sell and stay profitable. We can pull it all together and make it easier for them to get these drivers channeled to where they need to go. And then long-term, we can say, hey, it would probably be a good idea if we set up a space in the convention center lot, which might only be 50% occupied most of the time, and give them some concrete recommendations. But one-on-one specifics, we're all going to see that stuff. It's going to happen every day. Let's get some stuff together and give it to them.
Right, right, exactly. We need to
Then-
get all this input and kind of piece together what's the best package to put together. And
Sort of look at it as like solution-based, sort of.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, we can do this, just, we're not really changing anything, we're just trying to let everyone know this is available to the drivers.
Right, or we could tweak a lot of things. It may be tweaks, you know, to what we have to build on. But I would think we get a plan together that we think is acceptable to the majority of the interest groups before we would, you know, hope the commissioners take any action or before there'd be, you know, a enforcement change.
I'd like to hear what the chief has to say.
As you said, it's very extensive. Just one thing I wanted to stand up earlier and just mention is that our code where it talks about the loadings, is it on? It's on. Okay. The loading zone at top of Rehoboth Avenue, just be cognizant that our code rule hasn't caught up to it because it states that's a loading zone, but the reality is it's for mass transient. So the Jolly Trolley goes up to the boardwalk at the top. They have to have the inside because they have certain regulations to step off onto a curb. Dart buses in front of the restrooms, they have to be on the inside to be able to step off on a curb. And all, so therefore you're still putting a truck or something outside. What happens is these Cisco and Coca-Cola, these delivery trucks are going against the curb, and then you have the Dart bus or the Jolly Trolley on the outside. They're managing it, but it's not the proper way because you have somebody with handicap issues and all that they have to sit there and get closer up to the curb. So even though our code says that's a loading zone, the reality is it's hard for us enforcement to say it's okay at any time backing in and out of there for rigs. So I think you guys are on the right path. I think it's a major project to look at. I think it is about extending some issues where the bigger trucks can park at. And when we say bigger trucks, that includes the box trucks, because as I said, they cannot fit right in a regular parking spot. And this is, I guess, talking about the enforcement of the police department and parking division, kind of stick up for ourselves a little bit there, is it's difficult to enforce when we don't have a solution. I keep hearing we have to come up with solutions because they are trying to do a business. Believe me, you talk to any truck driver and they don't want to be here early in the morning. They want to be in here early in the morning. They don't want to be mid-afternoon and all. They want to get out of here because they can't stand the traffic either. And now, because not just here downtown, it's on the highway and everywhere else. So I appreciate you guys bringing this topic up. I think it's something that's needed. I said it's been over 8 years, and we didn't get a lot of buy-in, but I think it's to the point now we don't have much of a choice. We're going to have to get some kind of compromise and come up with some true solutions because, as I said, the fire company is involved in it, and I can speak for the police department. We're dispatching 911 calls, and it's getting more and more difficult to get down the street, and people are not getting out of the way because there's nowhere to go when you have parking on both sides and then a median. So even if they're trying to get out of the way for you, you are stopped, and anybody can see that on a day that is heavy beach traffic and we have a rainstorm come up and we're at a standstill for not, it used to be 2 hours on Rehoboth Avenue. Sometimes now it's 3, 4, 5 hours because we can't get out to the highways backed up. So it's a bigger picture, so I won't bore you with all that right now, but I appreciate you taking this on and look forward to being part of the team.
Well, thanks. Great. Well, and I think Chief Banks made two excellent points when we were talking. Number one, it's only going to get worse. That's true. And number two, that he thought was very critical with other things that are planned, like with what's happening in what the state is planning to do or what the city's already planning to do with street projects, that it would be good if we coordinate what we're doing with that, so it might be synergistic, and so that's why we need Kevin's input and what would be helpful.
Thank you, Donna. For me, I'm looking for a path forward, and I think how I'm, after hearing everything, I think, Donna, you're going to have some conversations with Main Street and the Chamber.
Ed, what I'd really like us to do, will we take some kind of vote, or I'm hearing a lot, as a committee, are we voting to proceed and to keep exploring this? I like an indication that the majority of us are, so I think if we could do something like that, and then yes, I'd be willing to do the things like reaching out to Main Street.
Does everyone agree that this needs to continue to move forward?
Yes.
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 If business continues to improve, then it's going to become more and more of an issue. So as more and more people come here, and we want our businesses to thrive, then we've got to help them get what they need and not disrupt the people that are visiting here, who are pretty important.
Yeah.
You're right, not give people a reason not to come.
So
Okay.
we just have to do our homework and pull it all together and then make a presentation.
Yeah, I get
Because to me, this all leads into the ill-fated conversation about one-way streets. We were going to create a circle around downtown, and you could integrate more delivery options if cars were only going in one direction on a street. But we got shot down on that, as we well remember, before we even got a chance to talk about it. Now it's come back up again, I believe, on the Wilmington and Baltimore streetscape side. There might have been some conversation about one-way streets.
In the task force.
Yeah, in the task force. So that's another opportunity that may be there for us, which would tie into this whole delivery issue. Because small vans aren't making most of the deliveries down here. It's box trucks,
right.
liftgate box trucks. That's the world.
So,
And so we need spaces for them. So, okay,
Right,
so
but-
I'm hearing, Dave, I didn't hear, are you feeling comfortable continuing to explore this?
I don't see how we can go forward with this until we do a comprehensive study. The commission, again, the commissioner shot down turning left, prohibiting left turns because it was a piecemeal item. They said we need to do a comprehensive study. That would include parking, that would include loading zones, delivery vehicles, left turns. It was all comprehensive. So I would say if you're going to move forward with that, then you better hire somebody to do it right, rather than us just piecemealing it together. That's just my opinion.
so I completely agree with you. And what I'll mention is, although there's the makeup of mayor and commissioners are a little bit different, but in the discussions with the streetscape task force, traffic, parking was discussed, having a study done was discussed, and again, also immediately dismissed.
Dismissed, right. I was on that.
Dismissed.
That was dismissed. So we couldn't even think about, in the streetscape idea, doing one-way anywhere, because it was
Dismissed.
Too traumatic. It was very traumatic, was our experience.
So maybe the maybe the feedback from this committee to the mayor and commissioners is, we can't do anything until we have a more comprehensive study done with parking, traffic. Hoyt brought up a lot of good points today about speed. And maybe that's the response, that the ball needs to get rolling on a comprehensive study. Just and this is kind of leading us into the next new business A, but, the city has land that eventually will be vacant. The senior center, has identified that, they're gonna start planning to build out on Hepron Road. That's a huge piece of land attached to a parking lot, that will, be vacant maybe in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Across from the Belmore.
Yes. So now is the time to have a study done and get plans to think about, 5 years from now, if the city of Rehoboth Beach needs a parking garage, that's the place for it to go. And start planning for that process. I'm just throwing one example out there. I don't know if it's real or relevant or not, but
I could be mistaken, though. Also, to your point, is that when the streetscape meetings happened for Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues, it was mentioned that we would be losing some parking spaces with what ultimately was the design that was drawn up, and that eventually there was going to be a parking garage. I thought I heard that. No,
it said potentially, but.
potentially.
But the
Yeah.
parking garage task force hasn't met in 3.5 years. I don't even think we'd ever finalized like the last few meeting minutes.
It was $10 million 3.5 years ago.
How much?
10 million.
Well, I thought they'd
So
sort of given up on.
what would it be 3 to 5 years from now? And it'll be too expensive then. So there are other solutions that are available to us, such as satellite parking and shuttles, that many other cities around the United States have accomplished fairly easily. But we just have this sense of entitlement here that we need to be able to drive in and park in front of the place of business we're going to. And yet if I go to Williamsburg, Virginia, I don't have that opportunity. I'm parking at the visitor center, I'm getting on a bus. And then I can go there. So somewhere in between that, there's probably some ground we can work on. But if we wait until the Board of Commissioners and the mayor decide to do something, that doesn't do one thing to solve the delivery problem that we could at least get part of the way to by mapping out where the loading zones are and providing that information to the business owners.
Maybe we could do
That
both.
wouldn't hurt.
Temporary solutions for now, and then recommend that we think a study needs to be done. And also, if you use the idea of safety, first and foremost, in that recommending a traffic study plan, that might appeal more to the commissioners.
Right, and then we clearly have identified that we have a speeding problem, but nationally during the pandemic, speeds have gone up everywhere. So as part of our lack of patience, which has evolved as part of our COVID journey and part of our just general unhappiness at the situation that we're in, people are driving faster everywhere. And Keith's not here right now, but 10 over has become 15 over, and 15 over has become 20 over on the highway. It's unbelievable. So it's the same thing here. My street is a 15 mile per hour street. That's a remnant from when it was a dirt road.
You're on a topic that's not on the agenda.
Yeah, it's just, all these, we can do things to solve this immediate problem. We can help solve it if we just do a little roadmap for these guys. Say, hey,
So
But
move this-
anyway, I think, back to what we were talking about, let's go ahead and have our discussion with the Chamber of Commerce, because they will feed it to all the businesses, and it'll be an item that people will be concerned with, even before any study is done. It would be good for people to be thinking about this. What can we do about this terrible problem we have on Rehoboth Avenue?
That seems like a compromise, because it's really a conundrum. Like, we do nothing here until this commissioners decide this bigger project. But
That
we
could
could
be-
like keep going ahead and some.
we need to do something.
Well, Dave, you suggest the idea of taking pictures of the parking lot? Would you,
I would think that's a start,
Parking
right?
spots,
So-
yes.
would you be willing to do that?
Sure. So you'll find that most of them are one parking spot. They're not enough for a semi or another truck. So again,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll be glad to take pictures of those.
All
And-
16? You can handle all
Yeah,
16?
and they're all
What they look
labeled.
like and
Yeah,
what the signage
As long
is?
as I can, if your email explains it clearly, I can find it.
That's what's in the code.
Yeah, it's all codified.
I'm sure I can find them.
Or if you need help, I,
I'll just
I
get
All
my,
right, so I want
I
to.
might take a
okay.
third of them.
I want to wrap this up with action items.
Yeah.
Donna, you're going to have communication with the Chamber and Main Street, and any other groups that you think is relevant. And I think we need to come back with an outline of potential solutions. Exactly, we'll have information about where the current loading zones are, what the current rules are. And I think that after that's compiled, and Dave, you've compiled a picture and list of all the loading zones, I think it's then relevant for us to, and this is all in addition to us saying, hey, we need a traffic parking study. We have to have a roundtable discussion here with someone from the fire department, someone from one of the delivery, a Cisco company, FedEx or UPS, a couple business owners, and we need to have a discussion here. Not a discussion, a roundtable, talking about some of the solutions, why some of them wouldn't work or would work for some of the different
Well, Ed,
stakeholders.
I would suggest that we do some of this one-on-one to start with.
I agree.
And then if, at some point, then bring
We do the
representatives.
one-on-one to build an outline for a roundtable,
Yeah,
is
yeah, I
my
gotcha.
suggestion.
Yeah, okay. Well, I can, and if you, Dave, you are so prompt about things. If you were going to take those pictures, or if I had those pictures that I would have to take with me when I go to Main Street or the Chamber, that might be helpful to be able to spell things out for them a little bit.
no problem.
Okay.
So Ed, just for the minute, for the record, Donna's going to talk to who?
Rehoboth Beach, Main Street, the Chamber of Commerce.
And Elise, are you familiar with the Chamber and Main Street? Would you go with me if I set up those?
Sure.
Okay.
Definitely
good.
familiar with Main Street, but yeah, absolutely. I'll do
Okay,
both.
great. If the two of us went.
Sure.
That'd be good. Great.
Love to.
Got it? Yep. Okay.
thank you.
With that, any public comment on this topic? Walter? Thank you. Our next meeting is September 15th at 2 p.m. Any general citizen comment, Walter? Okay. With that, I'm adjourning the meeting at 3:31 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.